And now what happened to this poor, wretched little boy? The door was opened, and he was recognized as one of the daring burglars. He was seized and dragged into the house by the manservant, and a doctor was sent for. Dr. Losberne was one of the kindest men in the world, and he had Oliver put to bed, and dressed his wound, and did everything he could for him. Then, afterwards, he saw Mrs. Maylie, the lady of the house, and her daughter, Rose, to tell them about the dreadful burglar that had broken into the house the night before. "This is a very extraordinary thing, Mrs. Maylie," said the doctor, standing with his back to the door, as if to keep it shut. "He is not in danger, I hope," said the old lady. "Why, that would not be an extraordinary thing, under the circumstances," replied the doctor, "though I don't think he is. Have you seen this thief?" "No," rejoined the old lady. "Nor heard anything about him?" "No. Rose wished to see the man," said Mrs. Maylie, "but I wouldn't hear of it." "Humph!" rejoined the doctor. "There's nothing very alarming in his appearance. Have you any objection to see him in my presence?" "If it be necessary," replied the old lady. "Certainly not." "Then I think it is necessary," said the doctor. "At all events, I am quite sure that you would deeply regret not having done so, if you postponed it. He is perfectly quiet and comfortable now. Allow me. Miss Rose, will you permit me?" "Not the slightest fear. I pledge you my honour." With many more loquacious assurances that they would be agreeably surprised in the aspect of the criminal, the doctor drew the young lady's arm through one of his, and offered his disengaged hand to Mrs. Maylie, led them with much ceremony and stateliness upstairs. "Now," said the doctor in a whisper, as he softly turned the handle of a bedroom door, "let us hear what you think of him. He has not been shaved very recently, but he doesn't look at all ferocious, notwithstanding. Stop, though. Let me see that he is in visiting order first." Stepping before them, he looked into the room, and, motioning them to advance, closed the door when they had entered, and gently drew back the curtains of the bed. Upon it, instead of the dog-black-visaged ruffian they had expected to behold, there lay a mere child, worn with pain and exhaustion, and sunk into a deep sleep. His wounded arm, bound and splintered up, was crossed upon his breast, and his head reclined upon the other, which was half hidden by his long hair as it streamed over the pillow. The honest gentleman held the curtain in his hand, and looked on for a minute or so in silence. Whilst he was watching the patient thus, the younger lady glided softly past, and seating herself in a chair by the bedside, gathered Oliver's hair from his face, and as she stooped over him, her tears fell upon his forehead. The boy stirred, and smiled in his sleep, as though these marks of pity and compassion had awakened some pleasant dream of a love and affection he had never known. Thus, a strain of gentle music, or the rippling of water in a silent place, or the odour of a flower, or the mention of a familiar word, will sometimes call up a sudden dim remembrances of scenes that never were in this life, which vanish like a breath, and which some brief memory of a happier existence, long gone by, would seem to have awakened, for no power of the human mind could ever recall them. When Oliver awoke, he told them all his strange history, but was often compelled to stop by pain and want of strength. It was a solemn thing to hear, in the darkened room, the feeble voice of the sick child recounting a weary catalogue of evils and calamities which hard men had brought upon him. Oliver's pillow was smoothed by women's hands that night, and loveliness and virtue watched him as he slept. And this, let me tell you, was the end of the poor boy's troubles. It is a very strange thing to relate, but the pretty Rose Maylie turned out to be Oliver's aunt, his mother's own sister, From the moment he entered Mrs. Maylie's house, his life was as happy as it had been miserable in the past. From that day forth he saw no more of that fearful place where the thieves lived, and the thieves themselves were caught and sent to prison, and everyone said it served them right.